Hi everyone, welcome to Past Business Intelligence Virtual Chapter. My name is Julie Cosmano. Thank you for joining us today. Today's session is sponsored by Pragmatic Works, and we will pick one lucky attendee from the list who will win a prize giveaway, which is I think ebook for this time around. So I just got a couple of past community news that I'd like to share with you before I hand over the control to Jessica, who will be talking through the session today. Just a reminder, Past Summit 2014 is coming up in November, I think it's from the 4th to 7th. And if you haven't registered yet, use the discount code VCSUM05 to save $150 off registration. And the price is actually, the price listed there, $18.95, is valid until September 26th. So you might want to make the most out of the discounted price or the lowest rate right now. Past Summit is a great way of learning SQL Server topic and BI topics as well. So and there will be lots of MVPs and other people who attend the sessions that you can ask questions as well. And if you're new to PASS, we do actually have a number of virtual chapters. So if you're interested in specific topics, like for example, perhaps in the healthcare or database administration, you can join that too. And here's a listing of virtual chapter meetings in August. So we do have a number of sessions available here, and I believe most of them are recorded as well. And we do also have SQL Saturdays around the world, in North America as well as international. For example, this one coming up in Johannesburg and Oslo as well. And if you'd like to volunteer, please do so. You can go to your MyPass profile and then change your My Volunteering section or your preferences on the My Volunteering section there. And we do actually award volunteers, and the highest award here is the Passion Award, which is usually awarded around August time or close to the Past Summit time. And if you'd like to stay involved, please join us on our website, sqlpass.org. That's the actual PASS website, or for the Business Intelligence Virtual Chapter 1, it's bi.sqlpass.org. And just a reminder, we do actually have 26 hours of free learning now on YouTube channel, and the link is listed there. So if you miss any of the past sessions, don't forget to go to our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jessica, who's a SQL Server MVP and a renowned author as well. And she'll be going through the differences between multidimensional and tabular in analysis services. So I'll just hand over the presenter control to Jessica now. Excellent. We can see your screen now, Jessica.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody, for coming today.
Sorry, Jess.
Switch that over. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Got two monitors going on, so it's decided to on me. I will go ahead and undo that. And
no worries.
Set that in regular full screen mode. A little bit easier for us. There we go.
That's a lot better.
Great.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks. Sure. Thanks, everybody, for coming out this afternoon or morning if you're international, and joining us to learn about analysis services, specifically the difference between multidimensional and tabular. So before we start, I'll just give you a little bit of information about myself. My name is Jessica Moss. I am a Microsoft SQL Server MVP for the past 6 years now. I'm a data architect, so I've worked at a variety of companies, and really have cut my teeth on SQL Server Business Intelligence. So done lots of different solutions and architectures for a variety of companies. And I really enjoy sharing what I have learned, and a few of the places that I've done that are shown on the screen. Twitter is Jessica M. Moss, my website is Jessica M. Moss, and then a few of the books that I have helped write as well are listed up there. But today what we're going to be talking about is analysis services. I want to go ahead and start by talking about really the history, where we've come from, to give you an idea of where we're going, where we've been and where we're going. Specifically, we'll drill into then the multidimensional model and the tabular model. Go ahead and show you the two different models, both from the developer perspective and from the end user perspective, and wrap up with a feature comparison for you so you can see when you would use one type of model over the other. So let's start with why analysis services. What is this thing that we're talking about? And really the point of analysis services is to semantically model the business for the end users. What I mean there is putting the data in a way that business users, that makes sense to them, so they can look at the information and translate it very easily to what they do on a day-to-day basis. So to do that, it really is an abstraction layer between that underlying database, which who knows what that's going to look like, and the end reporting or the client tools, which is what your end users are going to be using. So it's got that middle layer in case you do have to change anything on the database side, that the reports or the end users won't have to redo everything that they have on their end. It's also going to pre-aggregate the data for fast querying. So really, when we're talking about large amounts of data, sometimes running a SQL query is just going to take too long. So if we could do any of those pre-aggregations prior to an end user trying to access it, it's going to make them, and therefore us, much happier in the long run. It's going to deliver pre-built calculations for certain data domains. So a big calculation that we use in reporting is our date and time functions, parallel periods, previous periods, being able to compare the information over those types of calculations, over those time frames, really is a bonus that analysis services provides for us. And finally, the big thing is that it offers an accessible way for these users to query and analyze their information. Rather than having to learn SQL or a new kind of tool, they can hook right up to analysis services and get that information that they really require. So really what this all sums up to be is analysis services is really this friendly analytical tool that users really like using. So what is analysis services? We know why we like it. Well, if you ever hear people talk about slicing and dicing, that's analysis services. Every time you hear that, you want to start thinking about analysis services. It's really it's a tool. It's a tool that we can use for analyzing our data and reporting on it. It's just a service that we install as part of SQL Server. It's a separate service, just like you would install your engine or your integration services or your analysis services. And really is just a container for databases, cubes, just similar to the database engine you have today, just physical objects that you're storing that contain that information for you. So analysis services is really towards the end of the life cycle of your data. Really have it start with your source systems. So what we've got here is a picture of your really data life cycle when we're talking about reporting, where we start with our source systems. Source systems could be your human resources, your supply chain, any of your sales, your point of sale systems. All of that information you pull together using some kind of integration services or ETL, put it into some kind of data warehouse or repository. Then we bring that into analysis services, which is our reporting layer, that abstraction piece, pre-aggregation. And then, moving down to the very bottom, the access layer, your reports, and your Excel pull from analysis services to get that information to the end users. So analysis services has actually been around for quite some time. Back in SQL Server 7, it was known as OLAP services. It was actually acquired, I think, from a little company over in Israel and brought over and incorporated into SQL Server. They enhanced it into Analysis Services 2000 and renamed it. But if any of you worked with it in 2000, you may remember it as being a little bit clunky to use. It definitely had its pros and cons, but with a lot of the business intelligence products, Microsoft greatly enhanced it in 2005. Redid the whole interface that we use, added a lot more functionality both on the development and the end user side. 2008, they did a little bit more enhancements to it, a few more things with the querying, with if there was data that didn't have a lot of information in it, the sparse queries, it would have fast querying for that would come through. And then in 2008, R2, which came in about 2010, they introduced this new product called Power Pivot, which looked a lot like it put analysis services inside of Excel. It was very much the typical cube format that we had, except that it was very end-user friendly. We could pull data in from a variety of different sources, mash it all together, and it was extremely fast, even faster than a lot of the multidimensional cubes and queries that we had. And really what this was a new underlying piece of the engine, or a new algorithm that they were using that stored the data in a columnar format, and also all that data was actually being stored in memory. And as we know, anytime we're dealing with something in memory, the querying to get that out is going to be a lot quicker than if we were to pull it having to go out to disk. So we got very excited about Power Pivot, except it was only in Excel. So in the next version of Analysis Services, Microsoft said, "You're right, this Power Pivot thing is really cool. Everybody's very excited about it, but it should really be up in an actual server environment, or we have the ability to move it to a server environment to turn it into kind of the next step of from self-service BI, which was our Power Pivot, up to corporate BI, which is our tabular model that came out in 2012. And that's what we still have today in 2014 as well. So if we kind of think of the progression, we started out with a very light junior multidimensional model, typical cube that we were working with. We enhanced it, got very, very excited about it, 2005, 2008. And then we kind of started on a new path with a different format with Power Pivot and Tabular in our 2010 to 2012 timeframe. However, we still have all of these different options available to us. So let's talk about what those different ones are, different options are, starting with multidimensional. So as I've alluded to as we were talking about the history, multidimensional databases are OLAP cubes. They are meant for analytics, for processing. The information that is stored in them, we've got a couple of different objects. The ones that I want to talk about to compare to Tabular are the ones listed here. We have our data sources, which links over to our underlying data. We have our cubes, which stores the aggregated values for our star schema, the data that's coming through. A lot of times when we think of a data warehouse or a dimensional model, we have this concept of a star schema where we have a fact in the middle and then a series of dimensions around the fact that help describe what that is. So if we think of a typical retail example, our aggregated values would be our sales amount, our quantity, and let's go with those two. And then the dimensions would be all that describe that. So when the sale happened, the product, what it was that was sold, the location of where it was sold. And those, the dimensions that we have out there, is the third objects that I have listed here, which are the shared objects included in the cube to help describe those values. Now the Analysis Services Multidimensional model really is meant to sit on top of the data warehouse dimensional model that I just described. We can get the information from that model through a variety of ways. The three methods we have are MOLAP, ROLAP, and HOLAP. MOLAP is going to be our multidimensional online analytical processing. ROLAP will be relational, and HOLAP will be our hybrid. Multidimensional is bringing all that information in to the Analysis Services database and storing it within the model. It's running through all of those aggregations and up to a certain amount depending on the level that you say you want to do pre-aggregates for, but pulling those up and storing that in the model itself. So when you're querying, you're hitting the database and pulling, the Analysis Services database and pulling that information back. Now ROLAP is the complete opposite, where instead of the information being stored within the Analysis Services database, Analysis Services acts as a pass-through mechanism, converting the query into MDX into SQL to go against the underlying database, query the SQL database, and bring that information back. HOLAP is the final one, hybrid, is going to be in between those two, where we're storing those aggregations and some of that detailed level information. It will go down and get that information from the SQL Server database. Now, as you might expect, MOLAP is going to be quicker for the end querying, but will take longer in processing because it has to pull all of that in. So why would you ever use ROLAP? Well, we tend not to use it as much, but when we do, it is for if we need to get the data in a more real-time fashion. So rather than processing our data on a daily or even hourly basis, we can hit the database directly. Whatever the latest information is what we're going to pull into our Analysis Services, pass through Analysis Services to our end user. And the final thing that I wanted to mention for multidimensional is that the query language that we use to access it is MDX, also known as multidimensional expressions. So when we look at a multidimensional model from the developer side, you're going to see over on the right the picture there. We're going to be looking at AdventureWorks just for our introduction here today. And so the types of objects we have, a data source, the views that describe what that data source is, cubes, and the dimensions. And to wrap up our multidimensional, want to go ahead and highlight just a few pros, especially when we're talking about compared to tabular, which we'll get to in just a minute. A big thing is that multidimensional's been around a long time. It has a lot of features and additional properties that tabular does not yet have. And also the other big thing I wanted to mention is we're not going to be limited by any type of memory cap, as we'll see when we get to tabular. So let's go ahead and take a look at our multidimensional model that we have. So I am running 2014, and as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and look at AdventureWorks, the model that we have in there. So over on the right, we'll see our Solution Explorer, which should look similar to the picture that we were just looking at, where we have our data source views, cubes, and then each of our dimensions that are linked together to really make up the cube that we're looking at. So our data source that we're looking at here is against the dimensional model, SQL Server relational database for AdventureWorks. And we have a data source view for that pulls in all that information, and we could have created any additional links that we needed to between each of those tables. But really the big point of what we're trying to get to by bringing this in is this connection of facts and dimensions, which we can see in the middle here. Our yellow boxes are going to be our facts. We've got our sales, and then our blue will be our dimension that hooks over to describe each of those items. And I know that's small to see. We're going to look at each of those a little bit more over here on the left. So at the top, we have our measures or our fact values, things that we would like to aggregate. And moving on down, each of our dimensions, things that will describe each of those values, dates, products, locations that we were discussing before. So a few things that I would like to highlight from the multidimensional portion. We've gone ahead, we've got all our data in, it's all hooked up, we have our measures and our dimensions. There's a few extra things that the multidimensional model allows us to do. So within each of these measures that we do have some calculated measures that we have created directly within the measure group itself. We can go ahead and create new ones, or the new ones that were created already have the little FX function next to them. And we can also add calculations. And I'm going to go show this through the Calculations tab. And we create calculations using MDX. And really, these are ways that we can add additional business logic, additional information into our model. So what we have here is our internet gross profit measure. It's really taking two separate measures, subtracting them to get that value. We can set the formatting, the information on it, and go ahead and create that. In addition, I had mentioned some of those advanced calculations that we could do. We can do sets as well. Again, this is using MDX, so things like our top 50 customers, where we take our full set of customers, the members within our customer dimension, sorting based on how much they've purchased, and grab our top 50. So we can really have some of these dynamic sets as well that we go through. In addition, we can have some of our date logic. Got some of those scoped as well for that information. Okay, so from a development perspective, lots we can do. In our dimensions as well, we can set up hierarchies. We go ahead and look at, let's look at product. In the middle there, we can see the hierarchies that have been set up, such as category down to subcategory down to product. So that allows us to drill down from the end user perspective, as well as it creates those pre-aggregations for those values, making that querying fast for our end user. So we have the ability to create those as well. And then I think the final thing I wanted to show within this is our partitions that we have. So within each of our measure groups, we are able to partition the information into different partitions. Try to use a word that is not part of the name of it. Different sections of our fact table that we are able to process separately. And this allows for the processing as well as querying to occur at a faster pace. So we can go ahead and create those there as well. Okay, and so from a development perspective, we've set it all up, we've created it. We can go ahead and deploy that up, and once it gets deployed, it is going to go to our Analysis Services server. And we just went ahead and connected to this by saying connect to Analysis Services. And I have it installed just on my regular local instance here. So we'll see down at the bottom, we have our VentureWorks DW 2012 multidimensional, and this looks very similar to what we were just looking at in the development environment. And we could go ahead and create a new query here, run a query and access it. Or what we will probably end up doing is going through some type of client tool to access our data. So in this case, we're going to flip over to be our end user and use Excel to pull that information over. So in this case for our Excel, I go ahead and just shrink that a little bit, make sure that you're able to see it all. Oops, desktop. Make that nice and big. Great. So to go ahead and connect to our regular multidimensional analysis services database, we'll go ahead and go to our Data tab. Go to Get External Data, and in this case it's from other sources, and it's from Analysis Services. So we'll go ahead and select that option. We'll need to connect to our database that we were just looking at. So this is our Analysis Services database. It's going to go ahead and show us any of the cubes or perspectives that we have created based on that database. We'll go ahead and just use all of AdventureWorks. And now that we have set that up, it is going to go ahead and create a pivot table for us. And over on the right, you can see the types of things that we can query based on the model that we were just looking at. I'm going to go ahead and just restrict this to internet sales so we get a smaller set of information. So we're going to start over on the right side here looking at our measures, and we can select a few of those for our values. Specifically here, we'll use some of our sales information, internet sales amount. And that moved right down to our values area. And then we'll go ahead and use some of our hierarchies. We'll use a customer geography on our rows, which will start us up at our country. And at our columns, we'll go ahead and use one of our dates as well. We'll do our fiscal years. Okay. So this is really the idea of the interaction there. We can go ahead and drill down if we need to for each of those. And if we needed to, we could drill through some of that information. Actions is one of the things that multidimensional provides for us, or keep drilling down into that detailed information and see the details from the underlying model if we needed to. Okay, so let's go ahead and flip over to tabular model now that we have a good base of multidimensional. So, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, tabular is the younger child of analysis services. It's the new kid on the block, but it is very, very powerful. It is a columnar in-memory database, which means the information that comes in is essentially stored in columns, so it can squash the information on a column and stores it almost as a dictionary of the indexes for that information. Because it can squash it down so much, we're able to store all of that information in memory, which means we can access it very quickly. So when we're looking at the database itself, it contains really two main objects: the data source, the connection where we get that information, and then tables. Unlike our multidimensional model where we had facts and dimensions, in the tabular world we don't really think of anything like that. We just think of everything as tables. And we've got information in any of those tables and then relationships that connect them together. When we're talking about querying the tabular model, the query language that we use, that we do our work in, is going to be DAX, data analysis expressions. But it can also interpret some of the MDX as well, because it was built on top of the Analysis Services multidimensional engine. So when we're talking about getting our information, just like in multidimensional, we had our MOLAP, ROLAP, HOLAP. We have two modes for tabular, which is our in-memory and our direct query. In-memory is going to be having that information stored in memory, where we have access to it directly after we've processed that information. It is stored there and ready for us to query and pull that information out. Versus direct query is going to be the most similar to your multidimensional ROLAP, where it essentially passes through the Analysis Services database, runs that SQL query, and right now direct query will only run on SQL Server, runs the SQL query, gets the information from the underlying relational engine, and pulls it back and allows you to see the information. So as we mentioned, DAX, that information that's coming through, is really what you're going to be using. It will do some of the MDX there, and then at the direct query level, it's going to translate it over to T-SQL to hit from the underlying database. So if we look over on the right now, we can see from the development perspective what you're going to see when you get to your development environment. It looks a little empty compared to our cube model, but that is what it looks like. You have one model that contains all of those objects, all of your connections, tables, relations. So something to be aware of if you are trying to develop this type of model in a team environment with multiple people. Really make sure that you're aware of who's in there and what they're working on at that particular time. So some of the pros from the tabular side, really easy to develop. As we go in there, you'll see very clean interface, easy to get things going. And then because it is that in-memory database, you really do have the ability to query very quickly and get that information out. So let's go ahead and take a look at tabular. So we're going to start by looking at the development environment. over on the right, we'll see similar to what we were looking at before, which is the solution just has that one model file. But then when we open up the model file, and that's going to be the main pane we're looking at in the middle, you're going to see it looks very similar to Excel. So, and really, you can think of this as being an Excel tool. Tabular originated from Power Pivot, which was Excel. It was originated from being a way for end users to get in and put this information together in a way that they understood and a tool that they were used to. So it is going to be very Excel-like as we're looking through each of it. Along the bottom, each of our tabs are going to be each of the tables that we talked about. And as we mentioned, similar or dissimilarly to multidimensional, we have no concept of dimensions or anything like that. We just have tables. They are hooked together, however, and if we change to our diagram view, we can see how they are linked together. Now this did come from the data warehouse underlying relational database. It didn't need to, but we did in this scenario. So a lot of the connections that you're going to see came directly from that model. So it does look very much like the data source view we were looking at in the multidimensional world with our facts and our dimensions and the connections between those. That being said, it doesn't have to be. This could be a third normal form system. This could be some sort of reporting system, any other type of architecture that you had those in. And part of the reason that's important is when we look at the information that we can bring in. So if I go model and import from our data source, you're going to see we have a lot of the same options that were available in multidimensional land of SQL Server, Access, Oracle, any of those. But we also have some great additional options. Some of our OData feeds, anything from the Windows Azure Marketplace. You can even pull in data directly from a reporting services report, because that'll go out to a feed that you can pull in, as well as Excel and text. You can just copy those into one of these tables and hook it up. So even though we've gone outside of the Excel world into a real development environment, we still have a lot of that flexibility that we did when we were back in Excel. So let's flip this back over to data view and look at some of our calculations. So the way that we do calculations within our tabular model are going to be down here in our measures pane. And we can see them in any of the values that we have. We can select each of them. And the information about it, what the calculation is that will make up the value, is shown at the top in the where we would normally see an Excel function window. We're going to see the name of it to start with, separated by a colon and an equal sign, colon equals, and then the DAX function that makes it up. So rather than where in multidimensional we used MDX, here we're using DAX. Now DAX is supposed to be very similar to Excel, trying to go easy for the end users to pick up. And it definitely is easier to think about than MDX. MDX is a whole other world. But there are still some interesting nuances to learn as you're getting into the DAX query language. Especially when we start getting into, let's see, what's some interesting ones? Probably some of our date info. There we go. So we can get some interesting ones, functions, count rows, dates between, all these are functions, start of quarter, end of quarter, last date. and then we're pointing at actual columns within a table. Now you can link over to another table using some other functions that are available, some of our lookups or related functions. So you are able to make those relationships, those connections as well, and bring that information back. So we're seeing a lot of the same type of functionality in multidimensional, just a little bit of different way of handling it. One of the things we pointed out in the other one was our hierarchies. So I'll go ahead and show you that from diagram view. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. I think we had looked at product at the other one, so we'll do that here. We look at product. We can see we have the hierarchy there called category, which contains 4 levels, similar to the other one. We went ahead and pulled that in from this product table. We had to bring each of the columns in from a separate table because you build a hierarchy within one table to put that up together. And really this allows us to do our drill through when we're talking about that client tool and being able to pull that down. Now, hierarchies are a little bit different from the aggregation perspective, where multidimensional is using that to build its aggregations, where we're not going to have that in our tabular side. So that being said, with the hierarchies, it doesn't necessarily have to be a natural hierarchy where all of the levels are going to be the same. You could have a ragged one there. So just something for you to be aware of as you're designing. The tabular model there gives you more flexibility in being able to do that, but you can also shoot yourself in the foot by being able to do that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we've gone ahead and built our model, set all of that up, and now we can go ahead and look at it from the server perspective. So once we go ahead and deploy that, go ahead and open up our Management Studio and look at the model that we have up there. Now to connect to this, notice that the server name or instance name is different. It's localhost /tabular. You can only have one version of Analysis Services on an instance at a time. When you install it, you specify whether you want it to be tabular or multidimensional. So I actually have 2 different instances. One, the multidimensional is on my regular local instance, and then I installed just Analysis Services on its own instance that I named tabular, also on localhost. They both look like Analysis Services. The name of it is the same, all that information. You can easily tell if you're dealing with tabular or multidimensional because of the icon. Tabular has the fun little grid-looking thing where your multidimensional is going to have your typical cube. But you can go ahead and query them exactly the same way. So we could go ahead and create a new MDX query and actually query that using MDX if we so saw fit. Or what we can do, which is probably what our client or end user is going to do, is use our client tool. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and use Excel. And connect to our Analysis Services Tabular model. So we're going to go ahead to Data, get external data from other sources, and go to From Analysis Services. But Jessica, that's the same thing you just did before. Why, yes, it is. It's going to be the exact same way of doing it. The difference is what we connect to. So we're going to connect to our tabular instance on localhost. It knows it's Analysis Services, but picks up the databases that are on it, which happen to be tabular in this case. Which Which one should we use? Let's try that, SQL 2012. And similarly to, it looked very similar when we created the connection, it's going to look similar when we're actually using our pivot table as well. So it's created a pivot table. Over on the right, we get to see, we don't have measures now because we don't have our facts, but we do have the values that we can bring over as well as the things that we can slice and dice by. So we've got some information here. Let's go ahead and use some of our sales numbers again. So we'll use internet total sales, and it'll put those on our values. Close those up, and then we can look at some of the slicing options that we have to be able to group that information. So let's see, what did we do before? We did our fiscal calendar on our columns, and we did our geography on our rows. So we do still have that drill down capability. But notice when we go to our actions, we have none of those defined, where before we were able to do our drill through. But in general, we've got a lot of that same information that was available to us before. A little bit of a different look and feel for that end user, but a lot of that same info. So, flip back over here. Want to go ahead and make sure to include the feature comparison that we have. So I mentioned that a multidimensional model has a lot more features. It's a little more advanced than the tabular model. This is out there on Books Online, the link's on the bottom, that will show you what multidimensional has that tabular does not. We highlighted our actions as being one of those that wasn't available. But really what we're looking at here, these are both analysis services that we're working with. You definitely have to pick one or the other that you want to work with. Once you start to develop in one of the tools, you can't jump over to another. So definitely understand all the benefits and disadvantages that we covered. Multidimensional has more features. Tabular model typically is going to be quicker to develop. You don't have to worry about that underlying dimensional model. Put those tables in and you're good to go. Because tabular is an in-memory database, you've got to have enough memory to store all of that information in. If you don't, if you're really limited on memory, the tabular model is not going to respond for you. You're better off using your multidimensional model. So really, you need to make sure that you understand the needs for analysis, for your development team, and really in how they're going to fit into those models, and then you can pick the model that makes the most sense for you. Unfortunately, no silver bullet, as we would like to see, but just make sure you pick wisely, and you will make your end users happy in the long run. And Julie, that wraps up what I have today. If we have any questions that we typically do, do they pass them through a Q&A, or kind of what's our process now?
Okay, sure. We've got a couple of questions here. So the first one is from Richard. He's asking, is there an advantage to denormalizing from the normal form to a less normalized structure in the tabular model?
That's an interesting question. So let me talk around it a little bit. So in multidimensional, the dimensional model is very denormalized. We repeat those values so that we don't have to do a lot of joins to be able to get that information in. When you're talking about the tabular model, you don't have to have the denormalized form. You can go ahead and pull that over because the join is going to happen as it's pulling that data together. It depends. It's really going to be the best answer. If it takes more work to denormalize it than the query speeds, then no. But you can get some query benefits by doing the denormalization beforehand. And that is one of the ways that we can do our performance tuning from the tabular model, is to do any of those denormalizations or calculations actually in the ETL side. So that would be part of that, so that the engine doesn't have to work as hard. But I think I would always try it as is and see where the heartache is before taking those kind of steps.
Yeah, just to that point, I'd like to add that in tabular model, if you have more columns, it might not be as optimized. So if you have more columns on the table side, it might not be as optimized. So just have to be really careful, especially if these columns are actually in text formats, they usually won't perform as well. When they're numbers, the compression level is actually usually quite good, or a lot better than if it was text data type. I thought I'll just throw it out there.
Point. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, and then there's another question. I think Ryan would like to see the pros and cons up again for the multidimensional and tabular, if you wouldn't mind putting that slide up back again.
Sure.
Perhaps.
For tabular, we have the pros of easy develop, fast querying, multidimensional pros, advanced features and properties, not limited by memory. Just a couple of them to jump out.
Yeah. Cool. I think there's also another question. This is related to when connecting from Excel to the analysis services, both multidimensional and tabular. There's a question relating to whether whether you have to establish like a file connection, or whether you can save the connectivity details in a file or something like that.
We can save that out to a file. If you noticed, as I was creating it, it actually asked, do you want to overwrite the file that was out there? Let me go through it real quick and show you. When we're creating it, finish that out. So this is where it's going to store that file, the ODC file, out there, where you have a variety of those. So you can either create it or you can open it up directly from that file. So that's actually something, if you have a lot of users and you don't want to train them how to do it and know the server name, you can pass this file out to them so that they have it already available to them.
Okay, excellent. And there's also another question. I think this is following up to our earlier denormalization question. Corey's asking here, when talking about denormalization, everyone says keep it in the star schema. The product hierarchy looks like a snowflake. Am I missing something?
Another one of those fun it depends questions of from a denormalization standpoint. When do you snowflake out, or when do you not? And just to go ahead and show what you were talking about there, there's our snowflake, where you've got product and then product subcategories linked to it, and then product categories linked to it. There are definitely different thought processes, thought camps on that. I tend to go with, I will try to denormalize it all into one dimension if possible, but if not, the reason I would snowflake it out is if I had another fact that needed to link to that higher level grouping directly at that level. So to give you an example, if I had my sales that were linked to the product, and then I had, let's say, marketing that was done at a category level. It didn't break it down at a product. It was just for, hey, we have a marketing budget for bikes and a marketing budget for accessories. Then I would pull that out, because then the other marketing fact would have to link to product category, and I'd rather keep that information in one table if it's utilized by both two facts with different grades.
Okay. Okay, we've got another question here. In your experience, what is the percentage of user of multidimensional versus tabular?
Oh, that is a question I am not going to answer. Multidimensional has been around a lot longer. So I would say there are more multidimensionals out there, but I think tabular is coming up very quickly and will soon, if it has not already, surpass the number of multidimensional.
Yeah, I think it also...
Julie, what do you think?
From my experience, it also depends on where you live as well. The region, like for example in Australia here, I see a lot more multidimensional still, but I can't comment on other parts of the world. I actually had a chat with someone about this, and in some part of Europe, tabular is, gaining momentum. So it just really depends on where you are. And sometimes it's actually to do with the license as well. Some companies tend to not want to upgrade, for example, so they just, don't care so much about the tabular model. Okay,
that's a great point. So, and tabular, not only being in the latest version, only was introduced in 2012, it's also only available in the business intelligence and enterprise levels. So that could be a factor as well.
Yeah. So we've got a couple more questions. This next question is a little bit vague, but I'll let you decode this or decrypt this, Jessica. The question is, what level of access should be given to users in order to utilize these services?
Ooh, yeah. We'd go all over the place with that one, couldn't we? That's a great question. So you've got a couple different layers of security that you're dealing with. So there's the access to the model itself, whether it's multidimensional or tabular, the access to be able to connect to those. And that would allow them to pull in that information. You've also got the data source level, which is what's going to connect to the underlying data source to get that information in. So that would be used during processing, or if you're using roll-up or direct query, you could have that user's information passed all the way through to be able to use their credentials when connecting to the underlying database. So you've got multiple places that you can set the security for your users, all depending on how much ability you want to give them and at what level you want to restrict it. Keep in mind, multidimensional security can go all the way down to a cell level, versus tabular, your security is only going to be at your tabular level, or sorry, at your row level. Yeah, let's leave it at that.
Yeah, no worries. And there's another good question here. Does tabular model handle time variant dimensions similar to the multidimensional model?
Yes, you can set your date dimension as well to be able to do those some of those date calculations that we were talking about that I showed for the date dimension, the start dates and those sorts of things. So yes.
And I think we have our last question. What use case is there to apply tabular versus multi-dimensional?
Why would you use tabular over multidimensional? If you need data from some sort of data feed coming in, if you need data that you're going to pull in straight from a text file, if you need extremely fast querying with a huge amount of data and you have the server to handle it, go with tabular.
And I'd also probably add the fact that if you actually have to prototype something quickly, you might be able to do that in PyPivot and then upgrade it to tabular. That's a common one that I see these days as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Jessica, and for attendees for attending. And as I've mentioned, we are actually drawing a prize for today's session, so I'll be in contact. And thank you, Pragmatics Works, for sponsoring our session today. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.